respected past presidents of Urological Society of India, Professor P. Venugopal, Professor Ganesh, Chairman Indian School of Urology, Dr. Rajiv Sood, Co-Chairman Indian School of Urology, Dr. Arun Chawla, convener for this program, the convener of the Pediatric Urology Specialties, Dr. Anil Tekwani, the expert panelists for today's program, the students and the faculties who are participating in this event, the viewers from the Urological Society of India and the SAARC countries, a very good evening to all of you. Today, we are into the next round of this competition. Today, it's the North Zone group. Last 2 days, we had the South Zone. And all of you will readily agree that it was a wonderful competitions, and I really was overwhelmed with the quality of the presentations and the way the students were interacting with the panelists from the South. South has done a really wonderful job. Some of them, the presentations were quite excellent, even though I thought it was a very beginning, but they were well tuned to this program. Now, today is the turn of the North Zone. I again expect a much better presentations from the North Zone. My earnest request to all the presenters, keep to the time. If you overshoot the time, you will have negative markings. And when you answer precisely to the question. That's what the judges are looking at thing. So this is a competition. So you have to be time specific and you have to be very crisp and precise to your answers. With these few words, I welcome all of you once again, and over to the convener for this of Indian Pediatric Urology Subspecialty Section. Dr.
Rajiv, thank you very much, Rajiv, for once again for this opportunity to you as well as USA and ISU Council. Before I give it to today's moderator, Dr. Mallikarjun, have a couple of sentences. I missed thanking teachers who have equally participated into this particular competition. So 13 teachers participate by this time in two South Zone meetings. And now again, for rest of the 3 days, teachers are equally participating. Dr. Sivam, can you mute yourself? Sivam, sir. Yeah. So their contribution is phenomenal for the success of this particular webinar or can say the competition. So teachers, Sivam sir, you mute yourself, sir. Sir, mute yourself, sir. It started now. Krishna Swami, mute yourself, sir. Okay, so this is what Malika, I was trying to tell you that many of these now they have to keep themselves mute, right? So with that couple of
Anil, I think there are a lot of other people who have joined out of the turn. So
no. See, I tell you, Sivam sir is there as a party, is a teacher, right? Most of these people are there, right? So check once again, Fani Kumar, you check. You have a list, and those who are not belong to that list, you please see that they remain completely muted, or they should be taken out from this. Right? Yes, we don't want any kind of disturbances. It has went very well for 2 days. See that yes, today
can be taken care.
Yeah. So the experts and the teachers, please mute yourself. Keep yourself mute. Only unmute yourself when the turn comes to you. So all teachers, thank you very much for contributing and explaining the topics to your students in the depth and taking part overwhelmingly into this competition. And I also thanks to experts to give their valuable time. And with this warm welcome to all of you, office bearers, our secretary sir, who can I see, and our experts, judges, and the students and teachers and all viewers. With that short note, I hand over it to now Mallikarjun for further proceedings, as he is a moderator of this session. Thank you, Malika.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you, USI. Thank you, everyone. I think without wasting any time, may I ask Samuth to share his screen and then start his presentation?
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, your time starts now.
Okay. Good evening, respected teachers, seniors, and colleagues. At the outset, I'd like to thank USI, ISU, and Pediatric Urology Committee and my mentor, Dr. Siddharth Yadav, for this wonderful opportunity. Today's topic is factors affecting outcome of hypospadias repair. So what constitutes the outcome which a surgeon considers ideal in a case of hypospadias repair? They are cosmetic outcomes like a penis without curvature. Meatus should be orthotopic, slit-like, and terminal. The overall appearance should be symmetric with regular scars and without redundant skin. The functional domain constitutes a good urinary stream and no long-term sexual consequences. Usually a surgeon who operates a case seems to have a rosy outlook for his cases. So an external validation is the need of the hour. Few of the external objective assessment scores are hypospadias objective scoring system, hypospadias objective penile evaluation, pediatric penile perception score, and others. Most of these scores take into consideration same factors like the position of the meatus, the shape of the meatus, the shape of the glans, penile curvature, penile erectness, and the general appearance. Now that we know the outcomes, what we are looking for and how to assess them, let's consider what affects these outcomes adversely. So it is either a surgeon's inexperience, the procedure's inadequacy, or patient-related factors which lead to failure. But in most cases, it is a mixture of all these three. Factors which affect outcome can be divided into three groups like preoperative, operative, and postoperatively. Coming to preoperative, the timing of repair is important. Ideally, it should be done between 6 months to 12 months. If it is done in less than 6 months, it is the child is unable to tolerate the surgery and anesthesia. And if done in more than 18 months, it increases the anxiety and psychosexual tension due to genital awareness of the child. Characteristics of external genitalia are important factors and variables. The more proximal the meatus, the more is the curvature, and both of these act as independent risk factors for worse outcomes. A glans width which is less than 14 mm is shown to have increased complications. A urethral plate more than 8 mm shows better functional outcomes, but similar cosmetic outcomes as compared to a plate less than 8 mm in size. Adequate penile length is also important. The girth to length ratio should be more than 10th percentile of age for proper outcomes. It has been proposed that all these factors and the size problems can be solved by hormonal stimulation. The preoperative hormonal stimulation increases the penile length by up to 35% at 2 months, increases the penile circumference by 27%, and reduces the overall complication rate by around 7%. However, certain studies show that testosterone may actually impair wound healing and cause increased risk of bleeding. Once the decision to operate has been made, antibiotics should be given usually in a perioperative manner. This reduces the incidence of complicated UTI and oral complications. Coming to anesthesia, general anesthesia is the rule. Adding caudal blocks or penile blocks improves the patient's postoperative pain significantly. However, I'd like to mention that a recent meta-analysis published in IJO in 2019 show that caudal block is associated with a high risk of UC fistula and other urethroplasty-related complications, the relative risk being 1.8 and 2.0 respectively. The mechanism explained is that caudal block inhibits the sympathetic flow, causing pooling of the blood and penile engorgement, leading to excessive oozing and edema with severe intraoperative and postoperative complications. When we consider the surgical technique, there are more than 200 techniques described in literature. So it is of paramount importance to tailor the appropriate technique on a per case scenario. Usually a single stage repair is preferred by most in cases of mid or distal hypospadias, but due to the better outcomes. However, severe curvature or hostile genital tissue or severely proximal meatus necessitates the use of two-stage repair. Another important variable is what and how is the tissue used for urethroplasty. Does a flap score over a graft? So studies have shown that there is no difference in complications between the two. However, in the graft subgroup, a tube graft is said to have a higher rate of proximal urethral stricture development. Plate preserving procedures such as the use of urethra are preferred as there is no substitute of the native urethra. Hair-bearing skin should be avoided for the risk of complications like increased recurrent UTI and stone formation. Meatoplasty and glanuloplasty lead to a conical glans and a fish mouth wide meatus. However, we have to make sure that adequate glans wings are adequately raised to prevent pressure on the neourethra. Interposition layer is also important. It acts as a protective intermediate layer between the neourethra and skin. It should be well vascularized. According to studies, it leads to reduction in the fistula rate by up to 3 times. The various commonly used options are spongioplasty, Retix dorsal subcutaneous flap foreskin, Snow's tunica vaginalis flap from the testicular covering, etc. Tissue handling should be such that it causes minimal tissue trauma by the use of skin hooks, stay sutures, fine instruments, and dissecting in proper tissue planes, maintaining the vascularity of the flap for neourethra and skin. Minimal and pinpoint cautery should be done. It should be a tension-free repair. Well-vascularized tissue closure should be done in multiple layers, and epithelial inversion is paramount. Suture material, it is said that early absorbable sutures should be used such that they allow healing, yet they dissolve before suture tracts epithelize. The inner layer should be closed with polyglectin and rest can be closed with polyglycolic acid sutures. According to a study, it is said that subcuticular suturing technique has a much lower fistula rate as compared to full thickness suturing. To stent or not to stent is the next pertinent question. According to a study, it is said that failure, fistula, and meatal stenosis are higher when stented. However, this difference as compared to non-stented subgroup was not statistically significant. However, edema, stent blockade, and urinary retention are higher in the stented subgroup. Whenever stents are used, they should be soft and elastic and to be taped to the anterior abdominal wall to avoid gland separation by ventral tension. There are few points in favor of stent and few against the stent. In favor of stent are that it provides a temporary urinary diversion, permits repair to become watertight, to immobilize the suture line, and reduces tissue reaction, providing patient comfort. Points against the use of stent are that it increases the length of hospital stay, decreases patient mobility, causes bladder spasms, increased potential of infections or migration into the bladder. Stent, when kept, the duration should be around 3 to 21 days. There is a study which says that less complications are seen by increasing the duration of stent. However, this is not universally supported. As far as diversion is considered, a study indicates that there is a 2 times increased risk of fistulae when periurethral stented patients, in periurethral stented patients as compared to suprapubic diversion. However, this is seen as an overkill in most cases. And suprapubic diversion can be applied in complex repairs of severe proximal hypospadias or in some redo cases. Coming to the last variable in repair, whether or not to use dressing in a case of hypospadias. The main intention for the use of dressing is that it reduces hematoma and edema by immobilization. However, another school of thought is that a repair without dressing is better because coagulum forms sufficiently early and it seals the wound edges and resists contamination. It is said that an open wound is a dry wound and it is difficult for bacteria to colonize on a dry wound as compared to a closed wound, which is a dressed wound. It can be wet because of various factors like urine, feces, ooze, or sweat. This causes the increased risk of infections. However, this is still a matter of debate and most suggest the use of a dressing. Usually a 48 to 72 hour dressing is applied and the pressure should be adequate, not too much, not too less. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's nice on time. So I request Venu sir and Hemant sir to start the ball rolling at this point. Venu sir, please.
Samarth,
Yes, sir. Good evening.
can you explain to me when did you choose a one-stage versus two-stage procedure?
So usually in all cases of mid or distal hypospadias repair, a single stage repair is done. By the advent of tip repair, many have tried even in proximal hypospadias a tip repair. However, because of the severe curvature associated with proximal hypospadias and the associated corporal lengthening procedures, it is sometimes difficult for a graft to take and can lead to contracture of the graft. So in most cases of proximal hypospadias or severe curvature, a two-stage repair is done.
Pathak, you can take over.
Yeah. See, now you have listed so many factors.
Yes, sir.
But in which order you would put it up as 1, 2, 3, as one of the important, at least mention 2 or 3 important factors which affect the outcome.
So the first would be proper tissue handling. Second would be proper technique which is suitable to the case, well-vascularized interposition flap, and a tension-free repair.
Samarth, what Hemant sir was also asking was, is there any relevance in terms of outcomes or in terms of anatomy of what you see preoperatively?
So I did not get the question.
Glans, has the glans any...
Is there relevant as far as anatomical considerations?
Yes, sir. Glans, it is considered that the width of the gland should be more than 14 mm for the proper development of glans wings. Because glans wings, if not properly developed or if closed under tension, can lead to neurourethral pressure, which causes poorer outcomes.
You have any parameters which can be applied across all the hypospadias, like some scores or something? Which will, so you may say it is proximal, I may say it is mid-penile. So is there any something which is objective?
So there is one score which can be applied pre-operatively as well, the hypospadias objective scoring score, or there is one more score by which photographic evidence of the meatus can be looked at and can be checked comparatively to a series of photographs which has been provided along with the score.
That is what you do as far as pre-operative is concerned and post-operative
Yes, sir.
pictures.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing to be no bearing as far as the factors involved in repair of hypospadias.
Yes, sir.
It's a visual evidence.
Samarth,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned about use of preoperative use of testosterone.
Yes.
Which testosterone do you use? How do you use it, and how do you assess?
So testosterone, there are studies which have compared parenteral as well as transdermal use of testosterone vis-a-vis use of dihydrotestosterone or use of HCG. However, there has been no standardized route or dosage of administration of testosterone per se, but it has been generally accepted that testosterone does increase the penile length, the penile girth, as well as causes the distal shifting or the distal advancement of the meatus and reduces the degree of hypospadias to some extent.
Which one do you prefer, local
You
or
also
systemic?
mentioned
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Which one do you prefer, local
So
or
systemic testosterone, sir.
Don't like local.
So transdermal has shown to have variable testosterone levels on follow-up, and also depends on the compliance level of the patient as well as the attendant. So it is
How
difficult to monitor.
Samarth, how long will you wait after you give testosterone before you actually take up?
So even that is debated
Last
upon,
1
but
minute.
usually it is considered 2 to 3 minutes as an ideal period, because a study has proved that testosterone when given less than 3 months is shown to have a lesser impact as compared to patients who have received 3 or more months of preoperative testosterone.
Hemant sir, you wanted to ask
Samarth,
something.
Which are the commonest site of fistulas?
So it depends. Most common site of fistula because of would be near the coronal region or at the penoscrotal region, sir.
Samarth, you mentioned about the width of the urethral plate. Is it
Yes,
true
sir.
for all types of repairs, or
No.
is it only true for TIP repair? And do you measure the width? Is the width important without incising it or after incising it?
So there are variable factors. First of all, I would like to mention that a hypoplastic urethra is itself an independent risk factor. And if the urethral plate is present, then depending upon the type of repair, it varies as a risk factor for evaluation. However, it is considered
5
in most
minutes
studies
over.
that if it is less than 8 mm, then we require an incision of the plate or an inlay graft for proper tubularization and it to form a proper 8 to 12 French tubular circumference.
Okay, thank you, Samarth. I think
Thank you so much.
we will move on to our next this thing. Harkirat, please go ahead.
Malik, give 50-second or say 1 minute time to mark the score.
Okay,
And if you don't mind,
I don't mind.
Your audio was very good, but right now your audio is breaking a little bit while you was asking. So Malik, please check.
No problem. Okay. Okay. We just wait for about 30 seconds before Harkirat starts. You can continue sharing your screen, Harkirat. No problem.
Sure, sir.
So meanwhile, any one of us can make a comment for on 30 seconds on the hypospadias issue. There's no problem. Gyanendra, you would like to say something?
Yeah, so basically, when I talked about the width of the urethral plate, and what he mentioned was, this has been one paper where the width has been commented upon. Another factor is the use of magnification and use of the size of sutures,
Yeah.
where smaller size sutures are definitely preferable. But nowadays it is hypospadias. It depends upon which technique works best in your hands. For somebody, it might be tip repair. For somebody, it might be onlay repair. So quite variable. And also there is a huge debate regarding whether it is tip repair versus tip repair with inlay grafting. And can I mention that a recent paper in Journal of Pediatric Urology found no difference between the two techniques.
Okay, thanks, Gyanendra. I think Harkirat, please start.
Yes, sir. A very good evening, respected teachers, experts, and my dear colleagues. I am Dr. Harkirat Singh with my mentor Dr. Shiv Charan from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Rishikesh. And the topic given to us is types of catheterizable conduits, the advantages and disadvantages. A catheterizable conduit is a channel for urinary drainage which is constructed using native tissues and attached to the skin in the form of a stoma and can be emptied using the principles of clean intermittent catheterization. The indications of this procedure include either an abnormal urethra or an abnormal bladder. Abnormal urethra could be in the form of traumatic loss, congenital absence, refractory urethral strictures, or syndromes such as prune belly syndrome, cloacal exstrophy, sacral agenesis, bladder exstrophy, epispadias, posterior urethral valves, or neurological conditions like multiple sclerosis and spinal cord injury. Abnormal bladder includes a refractory neurogenic bladder, a refractory idiopathic bladder dysfunction, or following bladder reconstruction or cystoplasty. So why do we need a catheterizable stoma if the native urethra is already present? In children who have a neurogenic bladder, other associated conditions, such as if the child is wheelchair bound, this might preclude easy access to the native urethra. And if the child does not have any neurological deficits, a normal sensation in the native urethra can prevent compliance. Let's take a look back at the history. In 1972, Lapidus first introduced the clean intermittent catheterization, and this was followed in 1980 by Professor Paul Mitrofanoff, who devised the anti-reflux appendicovesicostomy, a catheterizable stoma. This was not popular until Marc Sendrin translated his French paper into English for the great Dr. John Duckett. And later in 1990, Melloni used the same principle to form the antegrade continence enema, popularly known as MACE. So what is the Mitrofanoff principle? It states that any tubular structure can be implanted effectively into a low pressure reservoir by creating a submucosal tunnel, and as this reservoir fills, there is a pressure gradient transmitted to the implanted conduit, coapting its lumen, acting like a flap valve. He used appendix, and as little as 2 centimeters can be used to achieve continence. The basic components of a Mitrofanoff principle include a continent catheterizable conduit, an easily accessible, cosmetically acceptable stoma, a good capacity low pressure reservoir, and clean intermittent catheterization. The technique involves a low midline or a transverse fan and steel incision, cecal mobilization and harvesting of the appendix, attaching it to the reservoir, creating a tunnel submucosally, and bringing it out onto the skin as a stoma. In the postoperative period, the silicone catheter is kept in situ for 3 weeks alongside a perurethral or a suprapubic catheter. Anticholinergics and adequate analgesics are a must, as is irrigation at least once or twice a day. After catheter removal, CIC should be taught, and it should be done every 4 hours to maintain the patency of the conduit as well as minimize the risk of stomal stenosis. The advantages of the Mitrofanoff principle include that appendix, which is a vestigial organ, can be safely removed. It is easy to implant. Children have a relatively longer appendix, and also this is a very reliable continent mechanism. It rarely leaks. The disadvantages would include higher rates of stomal stenosis, upper tract deterioration or appendicitis, kinking if the length is longer, and there might be certain situations in which the appendix might not be easily available. The variations of this procedure include a divided appendix when we require a simultaneous MACE and a Mitrofanoff, and conduit lengthening techniques involving the cecal base. Next, we move on to the Yang-Monty procedure, which uses the same principle as the Mitrofanoff. A short segment of small bowel is opened longitudinally and closed transversely, thus forming a tube which is devoid of mesentery at either ends, as shown in this figure. The advantages of Yang-Monty include that it is easier to catheterize as the valvae conniventis are redirected. Only a small segment is required. It has a reliable vascular supply, and it can be used in combination with a bladder augmentation. The disadvantages include that its length is limited by the circumference of the bowel. This can be overcome by a double Yang-Monty or a spiral Monty. The alternatives include a ureter, fallopian tube, gastric tube, or a colonic tube. However, these are fraught with complications and have lost their popularity. Another mechanism is the continent vesicostomy, which is formed from the anterior bladder wall. The advantages include a good continence rate and avoidance of bowel anastomosis. Disadvantages would include a decreased bladder capacity and stomal stenosis. There are various techniques to attach the conduit onto the reservoir. These include a flap valve, as we have seen with the Mitrofanoff and the Yang-Monty, nipple valve, as in the Cox ileum, or an ileocecal valve, as in the Indiana pouch. We could also use a ureter, as in the Ledux procedure, which is a transmural non-refluxing channel. The site of attachment on the bladder, whether it is anterior or posterior, has no bearing on the stomal complication rates. However, anterior conduits have an increased risk of infections and bladder stones. Also, when we compare concomitant augmentation cystoplasty and implantation either on the native bladder or the augmented part, the continence rates appear similar. And the stoma can be fashioned onto the skin by these four mechanisms, either a direct anastomosis, umbilical stoma, a tubular skin flap, or a V quadrilateral Z flap, as popularized by Ransley. The study by Landau et al. Has shown that the superiority of the VQZ flaps over other techniques with almost a 0% revision or dilatation rate. The early complications include bleeding, obstruction, anastomotic leakage, or necrosis, with the reoperation rate to the tune of 1.2 to 8%. Late complications include a stomal stenosis, incontinence, reservoir calculi and UTI, strictures, and the benign fibroepithelial polyps, which are rare. Experience from our center at AIIMS Rishikesh. So far, we have done 4 cases, 3 Mitrofanoffs and 1 Monty, and on follow-up, all the 4 cases are doing well. So what do we choose, a Mitrofanoff or a Monty? Studies have shown no difference in the complication rates, however, more catheterization problems with the Yang-Monty. In conclusion, I would like to say that CIC and Mitrofanoff, since their inception, have revolutionized the management of urinary incontinence, with continence rates as high as 98%.
Last 1 minute.
Although complications are common, the majority can be dealt with conservatively. And there is an important need to counsel the patient regarding long-term follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Harkirat. Wonderful. I may now request Dr. Ganesh sir and Venki sir to start the ball rolling. Ganesh sir, please, to start off with.
Right, Harkirat, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I want to ask you one question.
Yes, sir.
What is the bladder factors which will make your surgery difficult?
So, bladder factors such as a small capacity bladder would make the surgery difficult, as well as if there was a neurogenic bladder per se, after even augmentation, the component might still remain, and this might cause difficulty in and might lead to incontinence and proper not functioning of the conduit.
Venki, you want to ask him a question?
Yeah. So you've mentioned 2 of the most common parts of as the appendix or the Yang-Monty is to be used. Would you consider using the ureter for doing a catheterizable stoma? And 2, some of the bladder factors is if you have a grossly trabeculated or circulated bladder.
Ask the questions.
Okay.
No answers. Only questions, please.
So what is your opinion on use of the ureter?
The ureter has been used, but it has a precarious blood supply, and that could lead to ischemia. Also, using a ureter, and if you have a functioning kidney on that side, that would require a transureter or ureterostomy. And this would again be fraught with complications. That's why the use of ureters has been abandoned. And Mitrofanoff and Yang-Monty are the more popular procedures.
Harkirat, what
Yes.
causes the stoma to leak?
So the incontinence occurs because of the flap valve mechanism might be deficient. That is the Packen's ratio of 5:1, which is required for a proper flap valve mechanism. That might not be achieved, and that could cause incontinence, sir, and leakage from the stoma. A technical.
Any other problems? Any other factors apart from what you said?
So there could be a pouch formation on the conduit, which could cause leakage, as well as infection, and stones can also irritate and cause leakage, sir.
Yeah. If you have a problem in catheterizing at the lower end of the conduit, what would be your approach?
So if you have a problem catheterizing, we would give anticholinergics to relax the bladder and retry. And they could, first of all, we rule out the technical factors. So sometimes there might be kinking of the catheter we are using, or jelly might not be adequately applied. These are the most common causes. Otherwise, then we'll use anticholinergics. And still, if it fails, then we might use an endoscope and look for the problem, sir.
Hercules, if you have a small bladder and then you're augmented, how do you go about putting these channels?
So we have, if the augmentation cystoplasty is combined with the procedure, we can use the conduit either on the augmented patch or on the native bladder, and it does not make a difference, sir, on the stenosis incontinence rates.
What are the things you will take care on table to assure that your the CIC would be without any problem after the surgery is over? And when would you advise the patient to start doing CIC?
So on table, we would make sure that the conduit which we are making, it is easily brought out onto the skin. There is no tension, and as well as that there is no kinking. A redundant conduit would also lead to problems in catheterization. And post-operatively, we would keep a stent into the conduit for at least 3 weeks. And following that, we will start CIC with a silicone catheter, and that is to be taught to the child as well as the parents.
Kiran, what is the most important factor which will decide whether you want to do a catheterizable pouch or a non-catheterizable pouch?
So the most important factor would be the bladder neck of the child, how it is. If the bladder neck is proper and it can be reconstructed, it could, we might not require a catheterizable channel and we could reconstruct the lower tract. But if that is the problem, sir, we might need a conduit, a separate conduit, sir.
How often is it a problem with mucus secretion into the bladder and affecting the catheterizable drainage?
Sir, if you're using an
5 minutes over.
this would be a less of a problem, but if you're using ileum or a sigmoid colon for that matter, there would be a high chance of mucin, and this can be the cause of infection or stones. So to make sure, irrigation is a must, at least in the first few days after operation, sir. So irrigation of the reservoir is a must to prevent this complication.
Thank you, Harkirat. I think we're nicely on time.
Yeah.
So may
Malik,
I request
Malik, can you give me 1 minute before they mark the score?
30 seconds.
See,
And
the
then
thing is, Malik, there is some expert is having a, probably his WhatsApp very much attached to his laptop system. Rahul, you mute yourself. And who is this Malay Kumar? Malay Kumar is keeping himself unmute continuously. Who is this Malay Kumar? Fani Kumar, you check. Who is this Malay Kumar? First tell us who is Malay Kumar, because I don't know any expert who is Malay Kumar. He is just now muted, and someone at least having his WhatsApp is attached to the system, and that's why whenever there is some message, it is making the disturbances. And who is this Malay Kumar? Continuously there, or someone is joined through that name. So make it sure that these students are not getting disturbed and they get the best possible chance of presentation and question and answer. Yes, go ahead, Malik.
Okay, I think the 30 seconds for marking has anyway been done. I think may now request Dr. Shitangshu to start sharing his screen. Shitangshu?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, Shitangshu. Share and then start off. Full screen, please.
Yes, sir. May I start, sir?
Go ahead, Sitanshu. Go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Sitanshu, and my mentor is Dr. Binay. We are from SGPGI Lucknow. Today, I am going to talk on vesicostomy in posterior urethral valve. At the outset, let me pay tribute to Dr. Hugh Hampton Young, who a century ago described PUV. Over this century, we learned that PUV is the most common cause of bladder outlet obstruction in infants. We have also learned that endoscopic valve ablation is the most preferred primary modality of treatment in PUV with level 3 evidence and grade B recommendation. The advantages of endoscopic valve ablations are bladder cycling, improved bladder compliance and stability in infants, and possibility of less bladder dysfunction in adolescents. Cutaneous vesicostomy and high urinary diversions are other surgical procedures that may be needed in special circumstances. Now coming to the management, we at our center proceed through a simple algorithm. We have two channels, one green and one red channel. Whenever a stable child presented to us with no signs of sepsis, with no acidosis and no dyselectrolytemia, we generally prefer valve ablation. Whenever any child present to us with sign of sepsis, acidosis and dyselectrolytemia, then first we stabilize the child, catheterize him, then we decide for the urinary diversion. Now coming to the indication of vesicostomy. When to consider vesicostomy? Vesicostomy can be considered both in primary setting and also in secondary setting. In primary setting, whenever the scope are not negotiated, for example, in premature babies where the urethral caliber is small, or in cases who present with urosepsis, acidosis, dyselectrolytemia, or in some cases when there is lack of endoscopic facility or training, we consider vesicostomy. In secondary setting, following valve ablation, whenever patient present with recurrent infection or with high PVR with non-compliance of CIC, or if on evaluation we find out that there is no residual valve or there is progressive hydrouretronephrosis, then we consider for vesicostomy. Now, what are the advantages of vesicostomy? Apart from being simple, easy to reconstruct and reversible procedure, it immediately reduces the bladder storage pressure, reduces urosepsis and urinary tract infections. It gradually decompresses the upper urinary tract. In long term, it optimizes the glomerular filtration rate and also it improves somatic growth. Vesicostomy may not elevate need for transplantation, but can allow kid to survive, gain weight, and reach an age to undergo a transplantation in a stable and controlled state. If a child is clinically stable, as a rough guide in our institute, we take into consideration the age and creatinine level at presentation. Whenever a child under 1 year of age present to us with more than 2 mg% of creatinine, then we prefer diversion. We also observed that there has been a paradigm shift in the management of PUV with the emergence of subspecialty practice of pediatric urology in India and abroad, with availability of optimum instruments, with dedicated pediatric nephrological care, and with availability of broad spectrum antibiotics. In an audit in our institute over 28 years, 600 patients presented to us with PUV, out of which 21% has raised creatinine. We have observed that the need of vesicostomy and ureterostomy has drastically reduced from more than 10% before 2005 to around 5% after 2005. Coming to the vesicostomy techniques, the most commonly done procedure is Bloxham vesicostomy. Dome of the bladder is generally used to create the stoma after excising the urachus. The stoma size is maintained at least of 22 French and is made flush with the skin. Lapidase is the another technique where extensive skin flap are used to allow tension-free anastomosis. It is generally used for very small capacity bladder and it has limited application in pediatric population. Some studies have raised concern that vesicostomy defunctionalizes bladder. it decreases bladder capacity and ultimately causes poor urodynamic outcome. But in literature review, we have found that there is no adverse effect on compliance, no reduction in the bladder capacity, apart from one study which suggests otherwise. Coming to the complication of vesicostomy, the most common complication of vesicostomy are stomal prolapse, stomal stenosis, stone formation, parastomal hernia, and peristomal dermatitis. One of the most bothersome complications is the peristomal dermatitis, which present with redness, ammonical dermatitis, and excoriation of the skin around the stoma. We can prevent it with informed vesicostomy care, and we suggest that cleaning of the skin with warm water gently and wiping it with tissue, cotton cloth, or a clean towel, or applying skin barrier products like Vaseline or oil-based cream to protect the skin are always helpful. In summary, despite the popularity of endoscopic treatment in PUV, in special circumstances, vesicostomy has a vital role, both as an upfront surgery and also as an adjuvant surgery. Worries of its deleterious effect on bladder compliance and capacity appear unwarranted. Informed vesicostomy care is of utmost importance to prevent peristomal dermatitis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sitanshu. Please unshare your screen, please. So may I request Venu sir and Gyanendra to start off, and I request Venu sir to start the first question.
Gyanendra start.
Okay, Gyanendra, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Shrikanthu,
Yes, sir.
where will you take the incision for doing a vesicostomy?
So, a incision is made between the umbilicus and the pubic symphysis, between equal distance from the umbilicus and the pubic symphysis of around 1 to 2 centimeters.
What are the indications when in a child, when you want to do a diversion, you will not do a vesicostomy?
If a child present to us in stable condition and we are suspecting it to be posterior aortal valve, then and if there is no renal deterioration.
See, you understand my question. You have decided to do a diversion.
Yes,
If the case is a diagnosed case of PU valve, you have decided to do a diversion. When will you not go for a vesicostomy?
So if the capacity of the bladder is too small, that is small capacity bladder, and other is if there is bilateral hydrouretronephrosis, and if you are suspecting that there is progressive renal deterioration. In both cases, or in that case, we will prefer ureterostomy or higher image diversion.
Venu sir.
Shrikanthu.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell me, would you prefer to do a primary valve perforation as against a vesicostomy, or would you like to do a suprapubic catheterization like what Margaret Fish in one of the recent webinars spoke about, that they will do a suprapubic tube placement? Now, what is your option, and why is it that you prefer that option?
So, in our institute, we generally follow vesicostomy in place of suprapubic cystos, in place of SPC, sir.
I can't hear you properly, please.
So in our institute, we prefer doing vesicostomy instead of suprapubic catheterization.
Yes, Gyanendra asked a question which is very pertinent. When will you not do a vesicostomy?
So in cases of small capacity bladder, bilateral views of obstruction.
How will you know there is an obstruction?
If the patient on VCUG, if you see,
I can't hear you properly, please.
Yes, sir. If on VCUG, if we found out that there is no vesico-uretary reflux, if there is no reflux and there is hydrouretronephrosis, then we are suspecting that there is vesico-ureteral junction obstruction. And if there is presence of gross tortuosity of the ureter and gross dilatation of the ureter also.
Don't you think when you put a vesicostomy or urethral catheter,
Yes, sir.
If the ureter's pressure is taken away, bladder pressure is taken away, won't the ureter drain?
Sir,
Is
if,
reflux a very important criteria? I mean, in reflux only.
sir, if we are suspecting any obstruction at vesicular junction,
That's what I was thinking. How do you make out?
yes, sir.
So in the case of
So,
adequate bladder drainage, if we have provided adequate drainage with catheterization or with a stoma, if there is worsening of renal functions, then we will be suspecting bilateral VUJ obstruction. And in such cases, we will be considering higher diversions.
Okay.
The incidence, of course, we keep in mind is 1 to 3% of the type 3 Glassberg classification, in which there is UVJ obstruction despite drainage.
Last 1 minute.
Okay, Sitanshu, tell
when
me.
will you, yeah,
Tell me
when
the
will you
patient-
go for PU wall fulguration after you have done a vesicostomy? And how will you do it?
Sir, pardon, sir, just repeat the question.
When
Pardon,
will
sir?
you go for PU wall fulguration after doing a vesicostomy, and how would you do it?
Sir, after 6 months of follow-up following vesicostomy, usually we prefer doing one cystoscopy at that time, and we prefer to do vesicostomy closure at 6 months. During that time, we usually do cystoscopy, and if we find residual valves, then we do valve ablation.
Where is the residual wall coming in?
Sir, if during cystoscopy, if we find,
The question was,
yes, sir.
at what time or duration after vesicostomy will you plan for a wall fulguration?
Sir, minimum 6
No
months.
residual wall at that
5
time.
minutes over.
Wall only.
Okay, sir. Minimum 6 months, sir.
Okay. The last question, Sitanshu, is what are the non-valve indications for vesicostomy?
Sir, in cases of neurogenic bladder, in cases of in Krumdali syndrome, in cases of high-grade refluxing, yes, sir. And
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I think we give 30 seconds for marking, and then Dr. Nishkarsh, please be ready. Ganesh sir, would like to make some comments in this 30 seconds, sir.
Only small request, Malik, without your permission, the expert will not move on the question. The reason is that there are multiple voices, na? The student will get
I
confused.
am requesting Dr. Ganesh if you would make a comment for 30
Yeah,
seconds.
no. When the questions were going on, I seen that specific request to Gyanendra that it doesn't pointed out to you. Please don't initiate the question. Right? Thank you. Thank you. Take it positively. Yeah.
अरे नहीं यार, चिंता मत कर. Okay, Nishkarsh, I think please start.
I'm Dr. Nishkarsh Mehta from SMS Hospital, Jaipur.
You're not audible, Nishkarsh.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, I did. Now you're fine. Please go.
I'm Dr. Nishkarsh Mehta from SMS Hospital, and my teacher is Professor Nachiket Vyas, and my topic of presentation is endoscopic injection of deflux in reflux. Injection therapy in VUR first introduced by Mochusek in 1981, followed by it was popularized by O'Donnell and Puri as sting. They have used PTFE paste for subureteric injection, followed by multiple injection particles has been discovered. Among them, most common used is hyaluronic acid, dextranomar hyaluronic acid particles. It is the only particle which is approved by FDA. Mechanism of action. Injection of bulking agent will cause elevation of ureteric orifice and distal ureter. That will cause narrowing of ureter and it will prevent reflux. Properties of deflux. Deflux is a sterile, highly viscous gel of dextranomar microsphere. In that, hyaluronic acid is act as a carrier. It is a biocompatible and biodegradable product which will reduce its size in around 23% in 3 months. microsphere of dextranormal is ranges in between 80 to 250 microns. Injection of deflux is indicated in children with grade 2 to 4 VUR, which are not improving on continuous antibiotic therapy or which are developing breakthrough infection on antibiotic therapy, or because if patient's parents are asking. Technique of injection. Subureteric injection, which is also called as sting, hydrodistension and implantation technique, also called as HIT and double HIT. The difference between these three techniques are site and number of injection. In this picture, 3 is the site of injection of in sting. In that, we'll inject the deflux in bladder mucosa near ureteric orifice at 6 o'clock position, whereas in HIT and double HIT, we'll inject the deflux into the ureteric wall submucosally. This diagram is showing procedure of sting. We'll inject the deflux near the ureteric orifice at 6 o'clock position. After initiation of injection, the appearance of mound is very important. It should be volcano-shaped, and the final appearance of ureteric orifice should be crescent-like, like is shown in this photograph. HIT. In HIT, we'll use hydrodistension to distend the ureter, and we have to see the intramural part of ureter. After the hydrodistension, we'll inject deflux into the intramural part of ureter. In double HIT, we'll inject proximally and distally. Proximally will be around 3 to 4 mm above the ureteric orifice, and distally near the ureteric orifice. In a comparison study between sting versus HIT, the authors have concluded the reflux resolution rate for HIT was significantly higher than sting, and it was higher for both lower grade and higher grade. Follow-up. Antibiotic has to be given for 3 months after injection. USG has to be done after 2 to 4 weeks to see development of any obstruction, and voiding cystourethrogram has to be done after 3 months. After that, if patient is not having reflux, antibiotics therapy can be stopped, and if patient is having persistent reflux, then we can give 1 or 2 more times. Injection therapy we can give 1 or 2 more times. Reflux resolution rate. In a systemic review by Jonathan C. et al., reflux resolution rate for lower grade, it was around 80 to 90%, and for higher grade, it was around 60%. Similarly, in a meta-analysis by Elder J.S. et al., reflux resolution rate for lower grade, it was around 80%, and for higher grade, it was around 50%. But the drawback of these studies, whatever study they have included, their follow-up was less than 1 year. Now to see the long-term effect of deflux, Homdale et al. Performed a randomized control trial. They have included 203 children divided in 3 categories. First one was endoscopic treatment, and second one was antibiotic prophylaxis, and third one was surveillance. And they followed up patient for 2 years. After that follow-up of 2 years, the success rate for endoscopic injection was around 71%, and for other 2 arms, it was less than 50%. Similarly, to see long-term result of deflux, Shahna Jafar et al. Performed a study, and after a period of 2 years, the success rate was around 60 to 90%, and for lower grade, it was around 100%. Factors affecting success rate: grade of reflux, technique of injection like sting and HIT, anatomical bladder and ureter abnormality like neurogenic bladder, any bladder outlet obstruction or duplication of ureter, presence of any ureterocele. Appearance of mount also is very important. It should be volcano shaped. Surgeon's experience and injected volume. Recurrence. The true incidence is difficult to determine because whatever study they have done with reflux, their follow-up was not proper. They have followed up for less than 1 year. In different studies, recurrence rate varies from 5 to 20%. Higher recurrence rate were seen in patients who are having high history of multiple febrile UTI, bladder and bowel dysfunction, and renal scarring before injection. Adverse effect of deflux. Bleeding can be there at the time of injection. Other than that, UTI can be in form of febrile UTI or simple cystitis, ureteral obstruction and dilatation, dysuria, nausea, vomiting, and abdominal discomfort. Contraindication of doing deflux injection are non-functioning kidneys, presence of ureterocele, active voiding dysfunction, ongoing UTI, Hutch diverticulum, and presence of primary refluxing megaureter. According to EIU, for higher grade of reflux, the outcome of open surgical correction is better than endoscopic correction, but for lower grade, it is equivocal. According to EIU, there is strong recommendation is to offer open surgical correction to patient with persistent high-grade reflux and endoscopic correction for lower grade of reflux. According to AUA recommendation, if a patient of VOR is on continuous antibiotic therapy and he develops
Last
symptomatic
1
breakthrough
minute.
infection, change in therapy is recommended, which can be in form of open surgical reimplantation or endoscopic injection bulking agent. That will depend on VOR, grade of VOR, evidence of any abnormal voiding pattern, and parental preference. Take home message: endoscopic injection therapy of VOR is a reasonable alternative of open surgery, but family has to be informed regarding various success rate and outcome may not be durable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nishkash. May I request Dr. Vicky and Dr. Hemant sir to take to question Nishkash. So, Dr. Venki sir, to start, please. Venkatesh sir.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. This Dr. Nishkash, your presentation, you have put it as grades, indications is grade 2 to 4 VUR. Would you also qualify it with age, or it doesn't matter at what age you do this injection?
Sir, the different study, it is shown like for age is not a matter. For all the age, the reflux was similar, sir.
Meaning, suppose you get a 2-year-old child with grade 2 reflux, would you go in with the deflux injection?
No, sir. If his patient is developing recurrent breakthrough infection, then only the injection therapy is indicated.
Hemant sir.
I think Dr. Ganesh wants to ask.
Okay, Ganesh sir, please, no problem. Ganesh sir, please go ahead.
Let me ask you one question. Why was Teflon given up?
Sir,
why was Teflon?
High rate, because of is the PTFE particles, sir, and it is there was high rate of migration were there with Teflon, sir.
Where?
The size of Teflon particle were smaller than.
Where was the migration? Where was the migration supposed to be?
Which part of the body?
it can migrate to lung and systemic circulation if particle size is less than 50 micron.
What is the difference in the technique, the advantage of injecting deflux versus Teflon?
The deflux particle sizes will be higher than PTFE, so migration will be very less, sir.
No, in the difference is injection technique.
The technique in Teflon we have injected in bladder mucosa near the ureteric orifice. But
It's okay, Nishkash. Okay, Venu sir wants to ask something. Venu sir.
Nishkash, hello.
Yes, sir.
Is the configuration of ureter has any significance in your decision of this deflux injection or endoscopic injection?
Sir, sorry, sir. Once more, sir.
Is the configuration of the ureteric orifice
of the ureter has got any importance in the decision making as far as endoscopic injection is concerned?
Yes, sir. If the position of ureteric orifice is more lateral, then the chances of failure will be high, sir.
I'm not talking about laterality, mediality, configuration. How there are so many varieties of ureteric orifices, isn't it?
Nishkarsh, the shape of the ureteric orifice.
Yes, sir.
It's okay, Nishkar. It's okay. Hemant, sir?
Yeah, which would be the preferred child, which grade of reflux would you prefer as a child to inject?
Sir, grade
And
3
why?
and 4. Sir, grade 3 and 4, sir.
4. Okay. What is the main advantage of all these agents? What does it, what is the main advantage?
Sir, main advantage is the procedure will not be as invasive as open ureteric reimplantation, and the procedure can be done on a daycare basis.
After injecting, do you put them on CAP, that is continuous antimicrobial prophylaxis?
Yes, sir.
Last
For
1
3
minute.
months, sir.
Do you do MCU in all cases after deflux?
Yes, sir.
Venki, sir?
You have injected a child and you repeat the MCU. The child is now asymptomatic, but reflux persists. What is your approach?
If reflux is persisting and if it is more than 1 grade, then we'll inject once more, sir.
No, he has asked you very specifically.
more than
Patient
1
is
grade.
asymptomatic, but there is reflux.
Yes, sir. We'll inject once more if it is more than grade 1.
Okay, I think we'll stop the questions. I request Venki sir to make a 30-second comment on deflux. So meanwhile, it can be marked. I request Dr. Anand to be ready.
This is this is a good presentation on the injection technique. But perhaps we have to remember that most forms of anti-reflux procedures, whether injectable or surgery, has really not made any change to the outcomes of reflux nephropathy studied over several decades. What did change the outcomes is the recognition of bladder bowel dysfunction, the need for that to be corrected before you do any intervention. That is something that Nishkarsh has already pointed out, and that is what is going to make a huge change. Whether you will go and inject an asymptomatic patient with reflux is something that time will tell us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Venki sir. Okay, Anand, please go ahead. Start your presentation.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Anand Kumar Vijay. My mentor is Dr. Siyam Priyadash, sir. My topic is evaluation of UTI in the children. Why this topic is important? Because this is a common bacterial infection in the pediatric age of group of people presented with fever. It accounts for 7% of total febrile episodes in the newborn as well as older children. There are some interesting facts about the presentation of UTI. It is almost twofold higher in the male children below the 1 year of age. After the 1 year, it is more prevalent in the female patient throughout the life. After the gender, there are other risk factors, including like age. By the age of 6 years, 7% of girls and 2% of boys suffer from UTI. Caucasian girls are at risk. Circumcision reduces the incidence of UTI by 10-fold in first 6 months. Other risk factors include fecal and bacterial contamination, colonization, anatomical abnormalities, VUR, bladder and bowel dysfunctions. We know the relationship between the number of UTI and risk of renal scarring. Initially, 1 or 2 episodes of UTI causes less than 10% of incidence of renal scarring. After 3 or 4 incidents of UTI, renal scarring reaches up to the 40%. Presentation of UTI among the neonates and infants are non-specific. Neonates can present with septicemia, fever, vomiting, seizure, jaundice, lethargy. Infant and young children usually present with fever, nausea, vomiting, unable to eat, diarrhea can be there. Older children and adolescents usually present with dysuria, urgency, frequency, incontinence, malodor of urine. After general physical examination, being a urologist, we have to examine the abdomen and flank for any tenderness and masses. External genitalia should be examined for any bulging masses, labial radiation, phimosis, testicular tenderness. We should examine the back for any neurological signs, symptoms like dimples, skin tags. Here is a diagram. Ring protruding from the perineum, it is a ureterocele. There may be another opening, it may be ectopic ureter, phimosis, labial radiation, symptoms, acute scrotum can be present. For the accurate diagnosis of a UTI, we have to collect the urine sample by one of these methods. For the clean cast sample, there are some provocative methods described by Quick-B and Labros et al. The urine collection method for precontinent children, there are some non-invasive methods. Among these, nappy pad and urine bags are convenient, but they are highly contaminated and unreliable for the culture. Among non-invasive, clean catch has least contamination, but it is time-consuming. Other invasive methods like catheterization and invasive methods like catheterization, suprapubic aspiration, they are least contaminated, but invasive, painful, require expertise. What the guidelines say about urine collection? Our guidelines usually recommend suprapubic aspiration and catheterization sample for the non-toilet trained children because of high sensitivity and specificity. Other guidelines usually prefer clean case samples. After the collection of the sample, we have to go with microscopic examination. It will show more than 5 WBC per high power fed in concentrated urine, centrifuged urine, then it is considered positive. We have to stick test with their high sensitivity and high positive and negative predictive value. For the confirmation of UTI, we have to proceed with urine culture. According to our guidelines, if culture show 50,000 coroniformic unit along with urinalysis positive for pyelia, it considered positive. TAU usually recommend 10,000 coroniformic unit with symptoms and 100,000 coroniformic unit without symptom considered positive. We have some syrup or urine tests. They can differentiate or they can predict the kidney involvement in acute UTI, like procalcitonin can predict acute pyelonephritis in early UTI. Other urine biomarker can differentiate between the active infection and asymptomatic bacteria. Recently, we have real-time PCR that can detect E. coli within 2 hours and it result equivalent to culture. Now the radiographic imaging, we have ultrasound. This is non-invasive, inexpensive, safe method, and it is a modality of choice for screening and follow-up because maximum structural and anatomical abnormality we can diagnose with ultrasound, but it is unreliable for evaluation of VUI. NICE guidelines usually recommend all the children below the 6 months after first febrile episode, we should proceed with ultrasound, and after, about the 6 months of age with a typical or recurrent UTI, we have to proceed with ultrasound. Our guidelines usually recommend all the children between the age of 2 to 24 months of age after their first febrile episode. Next modality we have is Verdin cystourethrogram. It is invasive, more expensive, and most commonly used modality for detection and grading of VUI. NICE guidelines usually recommend BCOG for the children less than 6 months if ultrasound is abnormal or children have atypical UTI, and the children between the 6 months to 3 years of age with risk factor. Our guidelines usually recommend BCOG after the second UTI, but we can proceed with BCOG after first UTI if ultrasound is abnormal and there is suspicion of high grade of VUR. Next modality is DMSA scan. It is time intensive, invasive modality, but compared to less radiation than the BCOG. It tells us about the extent of inflammation and renal scarring. Photoclinic area we find in DMSA scan. It is proven that children with acute DMSA changes, they have high probability of having high-grade reflex on BCOG. Both the guidelines, NICE and ARC, don't recommend DMSA for routine evaluation of first UTI, but NICE guideline recommend DMSA after 4 to 6 months after atypical or recurrent UTI in the less than 3-year children. In the top-down approach for the UTI, DMSA scan should be done after the first febrile episode. If it is abnormal, then we should proceed with BCOG. Now I conclude my presentation by saying that UTI are very common in the children, particularly if they are presenting with fever. We have to recognize high-risk infant because they have high probability of having UTI, like high grade of fever lasting for more than 48 hours, absence of any source of infection, suprapubic tenderness, and uncircumcised boils. Accurate diagnosis and early treatment are important to prevent
Last 1 minute.
renal scarring and renal disease. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Anil Takwani sir and USI to give me opportunity, sir.
Thank you, Anand. Our experts would be asking you questions would be Dr. Ganesh and Dr. Gyanendra. So, Ganesh sir, please start the ball rolling.
Hi. What is your view on doing MCU versus DMSA scan? What would you prefer?
Sir, we usually prefer bottom-up approach.
What would you prefer? What would you prefer? Not we.
Okay, sir.
In your setting, what would you prefer?
Sir, we prefer VCUG after if ultrasound is abnormal and child has recurrent urinary tract infections. If ultrasound is showing the dilatation and parenchymal thinning is there, then we should proceed with VCUG. In the setting where the bladder is dilated, highly thickened, when we are suspecting the infravesical obstruction, then we should proceed with VCUG. Sir.
Is there any special problem of doing a VCUG in a child?
Yes, sir. It is a more traumatic procedure.
Apart from that.
Yes, sir. In the children, in the non-cooperative children, it is difficult. We have to go with sedation, sir.
So how will you avoid? How will the child avoid? How will the child avoid?
Sir, if we are in sedation, mostly it does not impact with the voiding of the children, but it is if child in sedation, then we put the suprapubic pressure to keep the child void by wooden stick, sir.
Is that a normal void? Or
No,
is it
sir,
an artificial void?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But it is usually
carry on. Gyanendra, please carry on.
Anand, very often in clinical practice, infants or children present with and their parents come with a urine report, which shows presence of WBCs in urine, and that is taken as some criteria to indicate presence of infection. How many WBCs are significant to diagnose UTI?
Actually, sir, it is said by the guidelines, the absence of pyuria is not is very rarely in the children. If centrifuged urine shows more than 5 WBC, sensitivity of diagnosing of UTI is high, sir. And if some guidelines say uncentrifuged urine, then we can proceed more than 100 WBC, sir.
Is that got something to do with the age of the child also?
Yes, sir, because very small young infants, they are frequently voided, sir. So there may be localization is very difficult. The WBC may be flush out or some other problem like fever also cause leukocyte urea, sir. So it is problematic, so we should proceed with, sir. More reliable thing is culture, sir.
Just like to add
if
here.
you are going for a top.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that this is not a confirmatory investigation. You have to get a urine culture done to confirm an infection. So pyuria may be present, may not be present. So it doesn't rule out infection. Yes, go ahead, please. Yes.
May I ask one question, please?
Anand, for a top-down approach, when would you do a DMSA scan after an episode of UTI?
Sir, we should do, usually we have seen that after the 2 weeks when child is symptomatically relieved, sir, and there is no urinary tract infection or there is no sign symptoms, sir, then we can proceed with, but the sensitivity is very high within 7 days when we do, sir, but we usually do after 2 weeks, sir.
Okay, may I ask one question? Anand, you said DMSA, but what is the implications of doing DMSA in an acute setting?
Sir, the basis of top-down approach is we want to detect the clinical significant reflux which are causing the renal damage, sir. we assume that if DMSA scan is normal or reflex is there, it will not cause future damage, sir. So our basis is detecting clinical significant reflex, sir, or their impaction on kidney, sir.
Anand, his question was whether in acute setting it will detect scarring or not. So in acute setting, it will only detect if there is a pyelonephritis or inflammation of the kidney. The scarring will happen usually afterwards. That's why we usually do after 4 to 6 months, right? So if there is a previous scar, then only it will detect, otherwise not. Yes.
Anything more from anyone?
Does age at presentation change your diagnosis or evaluation?
Yes, sir. Age matters, sir, because in the newborn or neonates or young children, they don't have usually symptoms for UTI, sir. We have to more suspicious for their probability of UTI. If there is no diagnosis, high grade fever lasting for 48 hours, we should proceed with more culture and all, sir. We have to diagnose more, sir.
Malik.
Thank you, Anand.
Malik, he's having some time. Then I would like to ask question. Yeah.
You please ask, Anil. You can
what is acute phase DMSA scan that exactly asked to you, and why we consider sometime acute phase DMSA scan, and what the benefit it gives?
Yes, sir. We know the sensitivity of DMSA scan is higher when it will done within the 7 days. And
what it will show? What it will show in acute phase DMSA scan in the recently taken the UTI episode? What it will show in the DMSA scan?
It is a photoclinic area, sir, and the bite of the kidney can be seen, sir, in the DMSA scan, and it is 80% sensitive, sir, in initial. But the drawback of this, most of the lesions are transient.
No, drawback. I ask for the advantage. At times, we prefer to go for acute phase DMSA scan, and why? What is the essence of acute phase DMSA scan?
Yes, sir. We want to detect the impact of the UTI or VUR on the kidney. On the basis, we can stratify the children, we can guide our treatment, we can effectively diagnose the UTI and effective other abnormalities like BPD. We can consider all things.
Okay.
I would like just to add here that nowadays, with the recent advances, non-enhanced MRI is also being explored as one of the investigation. And this MRI usually can actually differentiate between scarring and inflammation, which usually the DMSA scan cannot. So this is one of the recent advances which is going on. Right.
Thank you, Shivam. I think we will go on to the next. Karandeep, please start sharing your screen. I give 30 seconds to our teachers to mark. I think this was a nice discussion which has gone through.
देख अपन बाहर भी हो गए
बाहर हो गए वो
भाई
बधाई प्रेजेंट तो कर दिया अपन
I think you
Anand Kumar, mute yourself. Anand Kumar, please mute yourself.
Sir, is my screen visible, sir?
Yeah, you are visible. You are visible, and you are also audible, Karandeep. Okay, so just about 5-10 seconds, you should be ready to go.
Yes, sir. Good evening, esteemed expert panelists.
Go ahead. No issues. Go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, esteemed expert panelists, seniors, and my colleagues. My name is Dr. Karandeep Gureria, and I will be presenting a topic on how to manage a case of left absent scrotal testis in a 9-month-old child under the mentorship of Dr. Umesh Sharma. Now, before we go to the management, it is of paramount importance that a good history should be taken in such a case, with a proper antenatal history being crucial. We have to ask for maternal risk factors such as smoking, alcohol, and exposure to hormones and pesticides or other chemicals. We also have to ascertain whether the child was a premature or a full-term delivery child. Any history of IUGR or low birth weight is also very important. History should also include history of paternal risk factors, as it is known that sons of fathers who had suffered from undescended testis also can have undescended testis. Any history of any previous descended testis should be taken, as it suggests testicular reascent, and any history of any fever in the past might lead to a diagnosis of orchitis. Now, when we do an evaluation of this child, it is very, very important to do a local examination. And this local examination should be done in supine, sitting, or squatting position and in an upright cross-leg position. We have to look at the contralateral testis of this child as we do not know what is the status of the contralateral testis. We have to look for any compensatory contralateral hypertrophy. We have to look for any associated hernia, hydrocele, penile size, and external urethromeatus position. We also have to look for any associated suprapubic, inguinal, or any abdominal swelling. Now, a topic of controversy are imaging studies, with there being two schools of thought, where some people like to use MRI or ultrasound preoperatively in a patient of undescended testis, whereas the other school of thought says that there is no need for any imaging preoperatively, and it does not lead ultimately to any change in the line of management of these patients. But it has to be noted that it is recommended in specific scenarios in which there is a patient of undescended testis with disorders of sexual differentiation, or with a suspicion of Mullerian remnants inside, or in a patient in whom the testis is intra-abdominal and cannot be located laparoscopically. It must be kept in mind that if a patient is having bilateral undescended testis and there are signs of sexual disorders of sexual differentiation, a thorough endocrinological and genetic evaluation should be done. And this might also be required for a child with unilateral undescended testis, because we do not know whether the other testis is an ovotestis. Now, coming to the management, whether it being medical or surgical, management has to be surgical with orchidopexy, which should be done by the corrected gestational age of 6 months, according to AUA guidelines and EUA guidelines. EUA also says that the treatment should be finished by 12 months or by a maximum of 18 months. Now, why is it so? Because if there is any delay in treatment, spermatogenesis and hormone production is hampered, and there is an increased risk of tumor development in these patients. Now, for completion's sake, I will also talk about medical therapy, which is actually not recommended, and the level of evidence for this medical therapy is level 4. But there are certain indications of medical therapy where in recent studies, it has been shown to improve fertility indices, and semen analysis of patients who have undergone orchidopexy and have been given medical therapy in the form of HCG or GnRH analogs as adjuvant or neoadjuvant treatment. But short-term side effects of medical therapy should be kept in mind, such as increased scrotal edema, pigmentation, induction of pubic hair, and penile growth. Now, coming to my particular case, as there is an absent left scrotal testis, which is considered non-palpable, the testis can be either inguinal, ectopic, intra-abdominal, or it could be an absent testis altogether. Now, coming to the positions of an ectopic testis, we have to look, we can find an ectopic testis different from the part of descent, which could be perirenal, peripenile, superficial inguinal, transverse scrotal, contralateral scrotal, femoral, or perineal. Now, once we have a unilateral undescended testis and we take the patient for surgical management, it is very important and and I must say this over and over again, it is to re-examine the patient under general anesthesia on the OT table. Because sometimes under general anesthesia, the testis can become palpable, leading to a change in the treatment for this patient. And if the testis is now palpable, we go for a standard orchidopexy. But if even after re-examination under anesthesia, the testis remains non-palpable, we have to go for either a diagnostic laparoscopy or inguinal exploration with possibility of laparoscopy afterwards. Now, the general principles of a surgical management of non-palpable testis is, again, thorough re-examination under general anesthesia. Easiest and most accurate technique that we can do is diagnostic laparoscopy. Some surgeons like to start with inguinal exploration, especially if there is an enlarged or a hypertrophied contralateral testis with the possibility of an inguinal nubin. And on diagnostic laparoscopy, if the testis is usually seen lying more than 2 centimeters above the internal inguinal ring, we usually go for a staged repair. Now, the surgical options available to us are inguinal exploration followed by orchidopexy, diagnostic laparoscopy followed by a single stage or a 2-stage repair, open surgical repair, and microvascular orchidopexy. Now, inguinal orchidopexy has a high success rate of up to 92%, where the steps being inguinal dissection followed by delivery of the testis and cord mobilization, repair of any associated hernial defects, creation of a Dartow's pouch, and relocation of the testis into the pouch. Now, on inguinal incision, we might find two things: that the testis is and the vessels are present, then a standard orchidopexy is done. If the testis and the vessels are absent, then we have to open the internal inguinal ring and explore further. And on exploration further, if the testis is found, then we assess the length of the cord and orchidopexy can be performed according to the length of the cord. If the testis is still absent, we look for either blind ending vessels or we look for the vas alone with no vessels. In that case, we have to continue the exploration into the retroperitoneum to look for the testis. Now coming to the laparoscopic approach is usually done to localize the testis, where 40% of them being spermatic, with spermatic vessels entering into the inguinal canal suggestive of inguinal testis, 40% being intra-abdominal and 10% being peeping, and 10% could have blind ending spermatic vessels indicative of vanishing testis. What are the possibilities of on diagnostic laparoscopy? One being spermatic cord passes through the internal inguinal ring with the remnant of the testis present. If the then we have to deliver the testis into the abdomen, and a laparoscopic orchidopexy can be done, or a direct inguinal orchidopexy can be done.
Last 1 minute.
The testis can be seen just above the internal inguinal ring with a short processus vaginalis, where a laparoscopic orchidopexy or inguinal orchidopexy can be done. Otherwise, the testis with adnexa and a long looping vas can be found well above the ring, which is best managed by a stage repair. If no testis is formed, then we look for blind ending vessels, and if an atrophic or a dysmorphic testis is formed, then we do laparoscopic removal of the testis. Now, single stage repair is done if we can pull the cord to the opposite contralateral internal inguinal ring, and with the Prentice maneuver, the testis is brought down. In the laparoscopic two-stage repair, the first stage is laparoscopic vessel ligation, followed by a second stage of placement of testis after 6 months. There are the midline, the open approaches can be a midline transperitoneal, midline extraperitoneal, or extended inguinal approach. Vascular orchidopexy is done in genetic syndromes, high intra-abdominal testis, and child previously lost with a high testis by a more traditional procedure. The success rates being highest for inguinal and Fowler and microvascular autotransplantation. Complications can mean atrophy.
8 minutes over.
To conclude, such a patient should be followed up with ultrasound by doing a testicular volume evaluation and a testicular atrophy index measurement. No particular follow-up guidelines are available, and this is the one guideline that I found where a testicular atrophic index is taken. If it is more than 50, then testicular biopsy is demanded. If on testicular biopsy there is testicular dysgenesis or atrophy, orchidectomy has to be done. Another follow-up is done for patients with retractile testis, where they are followed up yearly till puberty. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Karandeep. For the last presentation, Venu sir and Venki sir will be the teachers who will ask the question.
Yes, sir.
Venu sir, please start the ball rolling.
Okay, start.
Okay, as you wish, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I have 2 questions. Now we're dealing with a 9-month-old child.
Yes, sir.
And we all know that examining a 9-month-old child is not going to be easy. They're invariably agitated, they're crying, all that. So actually examining and locating the testis is a problem. Would you still say that next step will be only surgical exploration, or would you want to do an ultrasound or some form of imaging?
So like I said, there are 2 schools of thought. Ultrasound imaging can be useful as a pre-operative measure to determine the actual position of a testis, because of an agitated child, you could not be able to do a local examination properly. But they say that because we are anyway, the management being surgical, and we are anyway going to re-examine the child under general anesthesia, therefore there is another school of thought which says that pre-operative imaging might not actually change the course of management of this child.
Yeah, I understood that, but then to tell a parent, will you just say that, okay, next time I want to take them under anesthesia and check? The other question is, you're doing an inguinal exploration for, as you've already mentioned, that you feel that the testis is there. So what is your indication for orchidectomy in this? Because that's what you have mentioned when you presented in your slide.
Sir, if on inguinal exploration, we find that the testis is atrophic or dysmorphic, then we can do an orchidectomy. If the patient, for this child, so as this is a prepubertal child, the indications would be that, sir. If the testis is found to be Nubin or atrophic or dysmorphic, sir, then this testis can be taken out.
I think I have to ask a question, Karandeep.
Yes, sir.
You said that in the investigative modality, you have different thoughts, school of thoughts.
Yes, sir.
What is your school of thought? What will you do?
Sir,
will you do ultrasound, MRI, or you want to re-examine the child under anesthesia?
Sir, in our setting, sir, we would do an ultrasound prior to taking the patient for an examination under anesthesia, because it is like sir said, because the patient has to be satisfied, sir. The parents of the patient have to be satisfied, sir. So in our center, we usually do an ultrasound prior, sir, to look for even to look for Mullerian remnants if present in the child, sir.
How reliable is ultrasound examination?
Sir, ultrasound examination has a sensitivity of around, sir, 60 to 70%, sir. Sir, MRI is preferred over ultrasound now, sir.
Then why don't you do an MRI?
Sir, MRI has a better sensitivity of around 90% with a specificity of around 100%.
Will you be able to do an MRI with anesthesia?
Sir, for this child, sir, I would not do an MRI, sir, because MRI would anyway require anesthesia.
You're contradicting yourself.
No, sir. For this child, I would not do for an MRI, sir. If this child, I would only do a preoperative ultrasound. Because MRI would anyway require anesthesia for this child, then it would be better to do local examination under anesthesia for this child, sir.
Ganesh sir, you wanted to ask a question, sir. Ganesh sir, please.
Yes, Ganesh.
Yes. What clinical finding will tell you that this testis will never come down? If it is not in the scrotum, but somewhere in the inguinal canal, I'm not talking about abdominal testis, but what clinical finding will tell you that this testis will never come down?
Last 1 minute.
Sir, if on palpation, sir, the vas cannot be pinched, sir, or sir.
Try again. Doesn't matter. Check it out. It's all right.
Okay. Last question from me, that how long would, what do you say if a child at 1 year comes with a retractile testis?
Sir, if a child with of 1 year of age comes to us with retractile testis, sir, then that child can be followed up, sir. The guidelines say that child should be followed up till the age of puberty, sir.
And then?
And then, sir, if it still remains retractile, then it is better to do orchidopexy. If the patient, if the testis comes down by that time, sir, then there is no need for any further follow-up, sir.
Okay. Anil, I think last
5 minutes over.
He has finished his time.
Yes.
You can,
if someone, I think we can mark now, and then meanwhile Anil will make his closing comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mallikarjun, for such an excellent moderation. And thank you very much to all experts before they prepare their outcome results. I request Gyanendra and Hemant Pathak to communicate with Dr. Ganesh or Professor Venugopal sir. And we have today Rajiv Sood sir with us. Sir, would you like to make some comment about these webinars which are going on since last 3 days, sir? Have some comments.
Thank you, Dr. Anil Takwani. This was totally different experience for not only the participants, residents, but all the teachers also. I'm sure that the eminent teachers like Dr. Venugopal, Dr. Ganesh Gopal, and all others who matter in the field of pediatric urology, Sham Joshi was there, Venkatesh is there. These webinars have given different experience of teaching and distance learning and virtual classrooms. And the competition and the 32 teams competing, all the zones coming forward, This has never happened before. And this was possible with this kind of new norms of teaching, e-teaching, e-academics, which is going to stay even after Corona period. And the way you have organized the whole program, and the way our secretary is there, Dr. Rajiv TP, now on the screen I can see, and the way all the faculty are participating program after program. And initially we were talking that this is becoming some kind of pandemic of webinars, but now it is becoming the norm of e-teaching and e-academics, and which we visualized 3-4 years back in 2017, and the proper shape is being given by the current council and our dynamic secretary and co-chairman Dr. Arun Chawla. So this has given us insight of teaching also, not only learning, how to teach. And now all the good luck to all the people all the residents who have participated, who has competed for the next level of competition, and this will create more interest. And with this, I'll also, and today is the all the zones are completing, and
no, sir. Sir, there are 2 more rounds. West Zone tomorrow.
I know, because South was having two days, 2 teams, and North team is completed. 2 more rounds are there. I mean the North Zone competition is over today, and today is also the day when our secretary, Dr. Rajiv TP, is celebrating his birthday. And we all wish him all the success with these programs, and also lot of enthusiasm should come in all the fields of his life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We have actually Dr. Mallikarjun, an excellent pediatric urologist with us, who moderated and kept him almost silent. So Mallikarjun, I would like to request you to make your observations on these presentations and have some couple of comments while these judges are preparing their judgment.
Yeah. You know, before I make, I think Ganesh sir raised his hand. I would like him to make the comment.
Sir, Ganesh sir.
Well, thank you very much to USI, Anil and Malik. But I think what I want to say today is that I am so thrilled that the residents and the mentors have put in such tremendous effort. And this is such a high standard of presentation that I, as a judge, am finding it exceedingly difficult to actually judge who's better. I think the mentors deserve a huge word of appreciation because they have sat down behind the residents, and this augurs very well for the society. And if we can continue to do this sort of teaching and learning, I think we will reach the skies. So thank you very much, and really hats off to the mentors and to the residents for this excellent presentation.
Thank you very much, sir.
Great job.
Thank you very much for excellent words, sir. Malik, you.
Dr. Shivam wanted to speak. Look, for me to speak, rather than that, I think I let all of other than to speak.
We'll ask all that, but if you want that opportunity to give your observation.
No, let Dr. Shivam say his words.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. I just wanted to say that it was a really great initiative. And I congratulate the USI, the Indian School of Urology, and especially Dr. Anil Takwani, who is the convener, and Dr. Mallikarjun Reddy for this, because this has involved not only the faculty, but also the residents. And it was also like a mock exam also. So, but I would request all the teachers and the faculty to be a little more proactive in such initiatives, because when we applied in North Zone, there was no team which had already applied it. So I would request all the teachers.
I had to request you. Special message I sent you that I want at least couple of teams from the North Zone. So
right.
Absolutely, the North Zone was the.
So both the teams were from our unit only, so we tried, and it started the ball rolling. I think that was good. So again, once again, congratulations. It was wonderful.
Posted on the various platform that we have 2 teams now came from the Jaipur, and thereafter we started getting couple of entries from the North Zone. But most proactive zone was the South Zone, and that's why they have 2 teams in the final round, and their zone is overall at the advantage. So really, that's a tremendous contribution from the South Zone. Yes, Malik, who is next now?
Yeah, nothing. I think in spite of so-called being into pediatric urology, I have also learned quite a bit today from these presentations. The only word of small advice which I can probably give to our residents is listen to the question, analyze it before you actually make your answer. You were in a little hurry to answer. So, but you knew the answer, but unfortunately, at some point of time, you could not put it in the right perspective. So my small suggestion would be that you have been mentored well, you know the data, you know the subject. Just take a little while, understand the question, and that would do well in your future. And I think, Anil, I was comparing you to anyway Lalit Modi, that people will always do something different and big. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. But Lalit Modi is not the right Miss, he involves a lot of politics, and we have kept the politics.
We are not looking at politics.
Anyway, but it is exciting, and like IPL, this has become exciting. So I'm taking that comparison very positively. I'm adding to the Malika's comment is that people of residents, they answer that the guidelines. Now, what we exactly, the expert wants that what exactly you are doing, or your mentor is doing, or your institute is doing, rather than answering that this guideline, that guideline. But that guideline will come later on. They will add the question that where you are reading, or where the reference. But when you answer, please answer that what exactly you are doing. Whether you are doing sonography or not doing, you are doing MRI or not doing. If your mentors are not doing, you're supposed to say, no, we are not doing, or we are doing for this reason, we are not doing for this reason, rather than talking about the guidelines too much, right? This is not the...
Dr. Venkatesh wanted to make a comment, Anil. Dr. Venkatesh wanted to make.
Sir, Venkatesh, sir.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a wonderful experience. And of course, the credit goes right down from USI.
Anil?
Sir, let the Venkatesh complete the comment, sir.
I can't get Ganesh on the line.
Okay. So, Professor Ganesh, will you try to talk to this Venugopal, sir?
The credit goes to...
I will.
Yes, sir.
To USI, the Indian School of Urology, and of course, Anil Takwani. I've already written to Dr. Anil saying what a wonderful initiative this is. But I must tell this, that I have seen the best of presentations when we go to the AUA in the Residence Bowl. And that, as we understood, was selecting the cream of students from the country and asking them to go there. But I've been looking at the presentations over the last few days, and the standard of presentations of these residents leaves me wonderstruck. This is simply amazing, which means there is enormous talent, and the faculty is willing to put in that kind of time to make a presentation like this. I think USI is poised for a lot more academic work than what we have seen in the past. The number of people participating in this is also increased. So I think there's all around credit, but definitely to the residents who have risen to this occasion for something that has been now becoming a routine. Thank you.
Yeah, Malik. Anybody would like to make any teacher before these results comes out? Yes, Dr. Nachiket, go ahead. Brief comment.
Sir, it has been a great opportunity, and I thank the USI President, sir, and Dr. TP Rajiv, and also Anil Takwani, sir, for giving the opportunity. I mean, it can't get better than this. Shivam sir is my senior, he is my elder brother, and for the last 10 days we have been having friendly banter that, we are going to defeat you, and his resident is also presenting, my resident is also presenting, and I used to give wrong suggestions to his resident that you should do this, and so it's been an absolutely wonderful opportunity, and if it happens again, then I'd definitely take part. And I thank all of you. I thank my elder brother and my senior and my unit head, Dr. Shivam, for giving this opportunity. Is a great sport, and I would definitely love to participate again with the residents. Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Just to inform both the judges, sir, rest of the experts have fit their opinion, and I have sent it to the WhatsApp to yours. Ganesh sir and Venugopal sir, I have sent the opinions of Hemant Pathak and Gyanendra on your WhatsApp. So if you want to look at, you just open your WhatsApp and you can see before you announce the result. This is on your request. They have sent their some comments.
Anil, sir.
Yeah, Rajiv.
I told you this.
Results has not come out, and we wish you a very happy birthday again. And please have your comments.
Actually, I told you in my opening remarks also, we have seen excellent presentation in the South Zone, and I hope the North Zone will do better. As they comes, the competition is better. I've seen the quality of presentation is pretty good, as Dr. Venkatesh has told you. And this shows the excellence and the efforts which has been put in. And all these days, everyone needs to speak how subspecialty of urology will develop. It needs a lot of things from the mentors. And this is the way how the mentor will groom his resident. And you know, a lot of efforts from the mentor is also behind the screen for the presentations made by the residents. Both of them have put in a combined effort. And this is the right way to go ahead with these competitions. So it's a different way of having a program, and this has gone off well. And I really congratulate all the participants. Somebody may win the competitions, but all of them, the resident as well as the mentor, put in great efforts to make the presentations, and all have been good. Maybe the judge's decision may be on a threadbare point. They may be calling someone as being number 1 or number 2, but all credits to all of them.
So this judge is decided to incorporate other experts' opinion. That's why we have a little bit of delay, Rajiv, to take the best possible judgment. They are incorporating the all experts' opinion, and experts are sharing their opinion with the 2 decided judges. So that's very good. That is excellent. Both are super bosses, Ganesh sir and Venugopal sir, but still they are desiring to have an opinion. So you can understand that how neck to neck fight is.
Yeah, if the judges are taking time to decide a candidate, that means they were not able to take an opinion who is best and who is number 1.
It's a neck to neck fight always since last 3 days. And all the
like Mallikarjun Reddy has pointed out, only thing is that the residents knows everything, but they were not knowing what to put in where actually, because they were a little bit anxious about the time and little bit nervousness was there. That's why even though they know, they were not able to put in the right thing at the right place.
Sir,
Venugopal sir, you keep mute yourself, sir.
Anil.
Venugopal sir, you keep mute yourself, sir. Yeah, Chawla sir.
No, Dr. Sharma wants to make a comment. I'm just seeing it. Dr. Sharma.
A thought which was there in my mind since the last 2, this is the 3rd session that I'm attending, is to make a request to USI that whether these presentations can all be incorporated in a single pediatric urology presentations and can be set up at the website for reference.
It will be archived. It's already there. It will be archived under the subspecialty session.
Anil?
Yes, sir. Are you ready, sir? Sir, you are ready?
Yeah.
Sir, you and Professor Ganesh will make a brief comment, and then one of you will declare the result. Brief comment about the performances of the students, sir.
As usual.
Well, I'll do first because PVG will announce the results.
Yes, sir. Please, sir. You.
No, I don't want to make any comment. I've said what I've said, and I think I don't want to waste time. This is a great way of actually learning, and congratulations to everybody, to all the presenters. And as somebody mentioned, I wish there were, as Shivam actually mentioned, that I wish there were more people and not everybody from his department participating. So let's hope that this is a trend setter and there'll be many more to come in the future. Thank you very much, and it's a great show.
Venugopal sir, time to have your brief comment and the result. People all are waiting since long.
The whole thing is you have put the judges in a very tight corner. Among the four of us who submitted their results, each one had a different way of looking at it, and the marking was a little different. So it speaks volumes of how each one has felt the topic, how they have discussed. To make the whole thing not too cumbersome, I think I'll announce the results by going to the second one. Runners-up is Anand. I don't know what his full
Anand. Anand is runner-up, right?
Yeah, he is runner-up.
He's from SMS.
And the winner is Samarth. Samarth is there?
From Sabdajang.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
So, Samarth, raise your hand, and congratulations from all of us.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations, both of you.
And all of you have done very well. I can't just say one person done less or more, but all of you have done extremely well.
So Samarth and Anand, Samarth is number 1 and Anand is 2. Yeah.
This program is becoming more and more difficult to judge because everyone is preparing better and better. If you look at the first day, second day, and today, the standard of presentation is increasing leaps and bounds. And I think it will augur well for USI. Thanks, Rajiv, for all that.
So it's not only congratulations to the Samarth only, but Dr. Siddharth Yadav is teacher. Is he there? Dr. Siddharth, can you show your face?
So he had some work he had to leave.
Okay, perfect. And the second is Dr. Anand, and his mentor is there. So raise your hand. Yeah. So Sivam is there. Sivam, congratulations to you also.
Sir, he is also my student, sir. He's my student also.
So Nachiket sir, double congratulations to you.
The whole of SMS, man.
Because you
all of SMS.
Okay, so some concluding remark from the Chawla sir as a tradition, and then all to Rajiv and maybe Malika. You can sum up.
Anil, nothing to state. I think teachers, experts, everybody have shared their sentiments and feelings. I have nothing to say extra. A beautiful job, wonderful job. Participants did very well. Teachers did very well to train them, mentors and teachers. I think all were winner and excellent, fabulous job. Thank you.
So, Malik, the moderator.
Final, we will see.
And then say goodbye.
So, fine. I think everyone has echoed their sentiments, and I don't think anything more from my side. It's been really nice.
So once again, you announced the result, so there should not be any confusion. Samarth is number 1, and Anand is number 2.
Yes.
Right, and congratulations to both these. And with that, I think Rajiv, we take your permission to call it a day.
Anil, how many viewers, Anil? Today?
Rajiv, have you got this feedback anytime? See, it was 528 on first day. Second day it was crossed 590, and today it is Rajiv somewhere. When I was informed, it was almost touching to the 700.
It is 769, I think.
769.
Oh, fantastic! This is the highest
So
today.
day by day it is increasing, and we are going to take promise from our secretary that if we touch 2000 by the final on 15th, we will be given opportunity to celebrate on virtual platform. So it will be preceded by 45 minutes of celebration on virtual platform if we touch 2000.
And then are you going to give us drinks?
Sir, yeah,
virtually
party, sir.
You
can have anything in your hand.
Yeah, Sonu Nigam will be called. Sonu Nigam.
So that's a promise. I think Secretary sir, you have to give us that if we touch 2000 mark by the final, I think you have to give this opportunity for a grand celebration of pediatric neurology subspecialty virtual meeting success, sir.
In
Yeah.
fact,
It's his birthday today, so he better well celebrate.
That's what
He can't just pass it off. He has to celebrate.
it is
about to say that Rajiv should celebrate.
your curve is going upward, and it is in itself is celebration that pediatric urology is doing such wonderful job and showing the path to all other subspecialties.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, yes.
That is
It
great.
has really,
That is
really
simply
boosted
great.
the other subspecialties, and they are on their toes now.
Yeah.
Every day I'm getting the
Yeah.
call, we want to do that, fitting the time, schedule the time. So now in the night, I have to schedule time for them.
Yeah,
You
that
can't
is-
do it tonight, Rajiv. You can't do it tonight. You'll be half drunk. You can't do it. Forget it.
This is dream coming
Are
true.
you going to give the winners a prize? Are you going to give the USI has got a lot of money? They can give some gift. Man.
Sir, I have,
Sir, wait for the Raju to announce, sir. Big prizes are there. lined
Oh,
up
very
by
good,
the-
very good.
Sir,
Very
I have
good.
already announced the prize, but I didn't say what is the prize.
Okay.
Now, since you're forcing me, I said the first prize will be rupees 10,000 and a citation, and the second prize will be rupees 5,000 and a citation.
Citation to both.
Citation will be there to both. Yeah, and the
Arey, yaar, in this COVID times, what you are giving 5,000, man?
and even the journal.
Half the
runners-
fellows are not getting salary, man. USI has got a lot of money.
We will look into it, sir.
Rajiv, you have to take the Professor Ganesh comment seriously. You have to increase today. Now. Talk to council and get the instant.
10,000 to the mentor also, right?
This is getting from bad to worse.
Dr. Rajiv, you were telling something about the zonal.
A journal first and second will get a citation.
Okay.
And there is a request from Professor Philip Raj, and that was a good suggestion that there should be e-certificate to all participants.
That is why I assured all participants will give a e-certificate. That's already there.
Actually, e-certificate will be given to everybody as we were giving in any ISU program.
It will be given. That will be after December. We will circulate to all. Whoever has participated in even all the webinars, the faculties will be given a separate e-certificate. And the participants, we are taking their email ID and everything, verifying their USI membership, and they will be given the e-certificate for participation also. And we have got a thing from the UP Council of Medical Registration. They are giving e-credit points. This is the first council in India which is giving e-credit points. And we have got the official thing from them, because none other state medical council or medical is not giving e-credits, but UP Medical Council Register has agreed to give e-credit points for all our webinars, because we have submitted them all the programs in detail, everything.
And all the mentors and moderators are our faculty, and they will be giving FISU status, that is Faculty of Indian School of Urology, that is given annual conference every year now.
Thank you, sir.
Chalo, bye.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
So once again, Raju,
it was a wonderful program.
Today.
It was a wonderful program.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you a lot, sir.
Good night.
Bye, good night.
Stay healthy. Bye bye. Bye, sir. Bye.
Good night, sir.
Rajiv, enjoy again.
Thank you.